The America we forget isn't just about history. It's about tasting it. In this episode, the Forgotten Flavors 10 Native American dishes that deserve a place on our tables again. We're going beyond the written word, into the scent of wood smoke drifting over a riverbank, the sound of mortar and pestle crushing seed into meal, the sight of berries glowing like embers against the snow. These recipes are more than food. They are the living memory of a people's relationship with the land, each one holding its own ceremony, its own story, its own reason to endure. 1. Wild rice and maple stew. In the lake country of the upper Midwest, wild rice, manumin. The good berry Sana was not planted in rows. It grew free, swaying in shallow waters, and was gathered by canoe as the seasons turned. Two people worked together, one poling quietly through the rice beds, the other bending the ripe stalks and tapping the grains into the boat. The aroma after toasting those grains was nutty, warm, and unmistakable. For feasts marking the end of harvest, the rice would be simmered with venison smoked over hardwoods, each bite carrying both depth and comfort. A drizzle of maple syrup, tapped in early spring and treasured through the year, transformed it from sustenance into celebration. Eating it was like tasting the entire seasonal cycle of the region: the thaw, the green, the harvest, and the first frost. 2. Acorn bread. In the vast oak forests, autumn meant the ground was scattered with acorns, plentiful, but bitter with tannins. Transforming them into food required an artisan's patience. First, the shells were cracked, the meat pounded into coarse meal. Then came leaching, rinsing again and again in running water, sometimes over days until every trace of bitterness was gone. The flour was then mixed, kneaded, and baked on flat stones or in clay, ovens until the air was filled with an aroma somewhere. Between roasted chestnuts and warm earth, the bread itself was dense, moist, and hearty, able to last for weeks. It traveled in packs on hunting trips and kept families fed deep into winter. This was more than ingenuity. It was an alliance with the forest, a partnership between patience and survival. 3. Three Sisters stew. This wasn't just a recipe, it was an agricultural philosophy. Corn provided a tall, strong stalk. Beans wrapped around it, climbing toward the sun. Squash sprawled at the base, shading the soil to keep it moist. Together they protected and enriched one another. In the cooking pot, their harmony became tangible. Corn brought sweetness and chew. Beans brought creamy body. Squash brought a mellow richness. Stewed over hours, the flavors wove together like the three sisters themselves. Served at community gatherings, it was a meal that nourished in more ways than one. A reminder that interdependence is strength. 4. Cedar-plank salmon. By the cold Pacific waters, fishing was sacred work. A freshly caught salmon gleamed like silver under the sun, its flesh firm and rich. After cleaning, it would be pinned to a cedar plank and set near the fire, not directly above it. The heat was patient. The cedar's aromatic oils seeped into every flake of the fish. While it cooked, there would be singing, story-sharing, perhaps drumming in the background. When served, the skin was crisp at the edges, the flesh tender and fragrant, carrying the scent of both forest and sea. It wasn't just food. It was a blessing you could taste. 5. Corn and ash cakes baked in the ground. This wasn't just bread, it was survival science. Native cooks didn't need ovens. They had the earth. Cornmeal was mixed with water, sometimes mashed beans or wild seeds, and shaped into thick dough rounds. These were wrapped in husks or leaves, then buried in shallow pits filled with hot coals and ash. Hours later, the cakes emerged smoky, chewy, and crusted with a toasted shell that carried the flavor of fire and soil. But this was more than a cooking method. It was a ritual. Some tribes believed the earth itself infused the cakes with power. The ash added minerals, and the slow bake gave the food a ceremonial weight. These weren't just eaten. They were offered, shared, and remembered. And sometimes beneath the crust, a hidden filling waited, a surprise of berries, meat, or herbs tucked inside like a secret passed down through generations. 6. Pond lily root mash. Beneath the calm surface of southeastern ponds, a treasure grew in silence. Thick, white pond lily roots. Twisted and heavy, they were pulled from the mud by hand, boiled for hours. and mashed into a bitter, starchy paste. It wasn't made to taste good. It was made to last, through empty hunts, harsh winters, and long nights. Mixed with wild onions or a spoonful of fat, it became a dense, rib-sticking mash that kept the body moving when everything else had run dry. But not all roots were safe. Some carried poisons invisible to the eye. Elders taught the signs. If the steam hissed like a snake and the air turned sour, you didn't eat it. You buried it. You gave it back to the earth. This dish was a lesson in patience, in caution, and in the quiet power of knowing what the land could give and what it could take. 7. Boiled skunk with juniper berries. Yes, skunk. Boiled, not burned. Served with care. In parts of the Great Plains and Southwest, when game ran low, tribes turned to what the land offered. Skunks were trapped, cleaned with precision, and simmered slowly with juniper berries, their piney aroma masking the musky scent and transforming the meat into something tender, rich, and surprisingly mild. One wrong cut and the dish was ruined, but done right, it tasted like rabbit with a smoky edge. This wasn't shock food. It was skill food, a test of patience, respect, and courage. To be served skunk wasn't an insult. It was a sign of trust. A gesture that said, you're strong enough to eat what others fear. And in some circles, it was a rite of passage. 8. Woodrat on hot stones. High in the desert canyons, where water was scarce and shade was sacred, tribes hunted a creature most would never touch, the woodrat. Not a scavenger, not a pest, but a clean-eating animal that fed on cactus, seeds, and desert roots, trapped at night, skinned at dawn, and cooked on heated river stones buried in the earth. Wrapped in leaves or laid bare on the rocks, the meat was slow roasted by the desert itself. The result? A crisp sear outside, juicy sweetness inside, slightly gamey, slightly smoky, and absolutely treasured. Children were taught how to hunt them quietly, how to prep them without waste, and how to share every bite, because in a land with few guarantees, even the smallest catch was sacred. 9. Deer fetus stew. This dish was never spoken of lightly. It was reserved for the harshest winters, or the most sacred occasions, when a pregnant doe was hunted, not for sport, but for survival, so the unborn fawn was not discarded. It was honored, simmered gently with wild onions, roots, and crushed herbs. The stew carried a richness unlike any other. The meat was delicate, gelatinous, and deeply nourishing. Some believed it strengthened the weak. Others said it connected the eater to the spirit of the deer, to life before it had fully formed. It was made with quiet hands and eaten in silence. To be served this stew was to be trusted with something powerful, a gift of life offered at its most vulnerable, and for many it was the most sacred dish they would ever taste. 10. Charred ant broth. They didn't just eat ants, they turned them into soup. In the Southwest and Great Basin, tribes gathered entire mounds of red ants, stingers and all, roasted alive on hot stones until their bodies crackled, then ground into powder and boiled with herbs, seeds, and cactus fruit. The broth was smoky, tangy, and packed with protein. Some said the stingers gave it a spicy kick that lingered in the throat. It was used as medicine, especially after childbirth or illness. And for young warriors, it was a test. If you could drink the ant broth without flinching, you were ready. This wasn't just food. It was fire in a bowl, a challenge, a cure, a memory of heat that stayed with you long after the last sip. These weren't just recipes. They were memories carved into fire pits, passed through generations and nearly lost to time. From ash-baked corn cakes to ant broth with bite, each dish tells a story of survival, spirit, and sacred connection to the land. If this journey stirred something in you, a curiosity, a memory, a sense of wonder, help us keep these stories alive. Subscribe to the America We Forget for more untold history, forgotten flavors, and the voices that shaped our past. Comment below, which dish surprised you most? Or share a story from your own heritage where we read every word. Share this video with someone who still believes food is more than fuel. It's legacy. Because remembering isn't just an act, it's a responsibility.